Coming up, a fascinating look at an exhibit featuring Jerusalem's holiest site, and Jewish artifacts are discovered that shed light on a dark chapter from the past. Welcome to 700 Club Canada. I'm so glad you're watching from wherever you're watching today. And today we're going to be talking about Israel. And maybe you didn't know this, but the name Israel comes from a man named Jacob, who God changed his name to Israel because he wrestled with God. I love this because the whole story of the Bible and Israel is a story of humanity's wrestling with the deepest questions of life and morality and what we can learn from it. And so I want you today just to engage with the stories, let it transform and change you. Ask those difficult questions. You know what? God isn't afraid of the hard questions, and he's not afraid of the wrestling, for it's actually in that process that we become clearer in who he is and better for it. And so now, a look at a new film documentary on the unique history of the Iraqi Jews.
This story begins almost 3,000 years ago in Iraq. That's when the Bible tells how the Jewish people were exiled to Babylon, located some 60 miles from modern-day Baghdad. After the exile ended, many descendants stayed there for generations until the State of Israel was established in 1948.
One thing my mom told me, she said, when you leave Baghdad, never talk about the stuff that happened. Don't talk about it at all. She said, nobody wants to hear morbid stories because whatever happened was morbid. I told her, but why? I want everybody to know what we've been through if we survive, if we get out.
Filmmakers Carol Basri and Adriana Davis agreed the story needed to be told. Their documentary, Saving the Iraqi Jewish Archives, A Journey of Identity, tells how this Jewish community faced its own forced exodus from Iraq after more than 2,500 years. It sheds new light on the history of this community, the struggle to save the evidence of its existence, and the fight to keep the story alive.
I've learned that it's a much bigger issue than just things from the Iraqi Jews. It's also about the cultural and religious heritage of all ethnically cleansed people in the Middle East.
The archives, to me, became the sort of physical embodiment of the way the community was legally disseminated, because there is a legal precedent that detailed the laws that forced the Jewish community out. If you can't work and you can't go to school and you can't even hold money in the bank, you can't hold property, how are you to stay?
Due to this growing persecution, more than 160,000 Iraqi Jews began fleeing their homeland in 1952. Over the following decades, Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government continued to punish the community by stripping property, seizing religious and cultural items, and purging personal records, including photographs.
I don't know if people understand that when the Iraqi Jews left their homeland of 2,700 years since the first temple, we were not allowed legally to take anything out of the country except 3 sets of clothes and 50 dinars, and you could take your wedding ring. That's it.
I'm trying to go abroad to continue my graduate studies and so on, and word came back to show up at the headquarters of the internal security. They ushered me into a room where they were taking somebody out who was already being interrogated, and, who was all blood on his head and so on. It was a little bit of a frightening experience.
Fast forward to 2003, when during the Iraq War, the U.S. bombed the Mukhabarat secret police headquarters in Baghdad. Explosions ruptured the water system and flooded the basement. Based on an intelligence tip, Harold Rode, an Orthodox Jew working for the Pentagon, and others entered the building and found the collection of Jewish belongings underwater. With U.S. military help, they rescued nearly 20,000 personal and religious artifacts confiscated from the Jewish community, some hundreds of years old.
This whole project is a project of miracles. Hashem, God put me there. As far as I'm concerned, I was there to be there to help make this project work.
Items included Torah scrolls and prayer books, as well as documents of the Frank Eni School, the last Jewish school in Iraq. It closed in 1972, and its founder, Frank Eni, was Basri's grandfather.
The school that my grandfather founded was founded because of the Farhud, which was the pro-Nazi uprising in Iraq in 1941. Well, there was no Israel then.
The damaged artifacts were shipped to the National Archives in Washington for restoration.
In watching how that community left, to have miraculously found all this material, religious, cultural, personal material, to find all those items was, to me, the actual physical embodiment of the spirit of the Iraqi Jewish community.
The U.S. government's initial agreement indicated it would return the archives to Iraq, where there are just a handful of Jews left today. The State Department is trying to work out a new deal whereby the archives would stay in the U.S. The Jewish community is concerned that if it's returned, it will only be neglected or, worse, destroyed. And they say the items belong to them anyway. Iraq argues it wants to put the items on display as part of the country's national heritage.
I believe that the Iraqi Jewish story is an important story to tell, and it can only be told with the artifacts, the cultural and religious artifacts that are part of the Iraqi Jewish archives.
The filmmakers see the driving out of the Jews as the same kind of ethnic cleansing from which so many Christians in the Middle East have suffered during the last decade.
I believe that that is a universal story. It's not a Jewish story. As someone from not that background by birth, I understand the parallels to early Christians, or, even what's going on now. We just heard about it in the news when the Pope visited.
Davis says they need another miracle in order to keep the archives in the U.S. safe and accessible to tell the Iraqi Jewish story to generations to come. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
As I was watching that story, I was reminded that throughout history, God's people have been persecuted. And the question really is, how should we respond in the face of persecution? Well, Jesus gave us the answer. In John 16:32, he said, "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone, yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So let's reverse engineer the words that Jesus said. The first is a promise, and we love the promises of God, but maybe not this one. He said, you will have trouble. So do not be surprised when it comes. The Bible reminds us that we're in a spiritual battle, and it's not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness, that there is a storm raging all around us, and sometimes we're going to get caught in it. But he also said, remain in me. This means that trusting that God is in control, even when it seems like complete chaos, and that he does really work all things together for good. So just like we're in the storm, Jesus one time was with his disciples in the storm, and they were so overwhelmed, they cried out to him, "Don't you care? We're gonna die." And he said to them, "Where's your faith?" In other words, don't you believe I am who I say I am? I am the great storm shelter. And then finally, we get to choose peace. You heard me right. It is a choice. Peace isn't something that happens outside of us because we can't control that. Peace is a choice to trust God inside. And so when you're tempted to feel like you have to do something to fix it, can I help you? You can't. But what you can do is rest in God's promises that Jesus does calm the storm. So let me ask you a question. What area of your life do you need to choose peace and trust that God's got it today? We'd love to pray with you if you're struggling in this area. We'd love to put this in your hand, freedom from anxiety. So why not call us today at 1-855-759-0700, and we'll pray for God's peace in your storm. And now, have you heard the term bridegroom of Christ? Well, what does it mean? Well, biblical scholar Joe Amaral has the answer.
Okay, guys, now we're coming to it. We're coming to the end, to this amazing conclusion of the celebration of the betrothal process of how a man and a woman became married in those days. So we've talked about, let's review real quick. We have the offer made, the covenant established, the price is paid. He knocks on the door, he comes in, he sits with her, he pours her the glass of wine, he gives her the gift, and now he goes back to his father's house to begin to build a new home where they're going to make a life for themselves. And you know, in churches, people always kind of have a laugh at this because it's the man who's responsible for building and decorating the home. I'm not sure how many of you ladies out there would be comfortable with your guy decorating your house, but that's how it was done in that time. And if we want to really understand statements that Jesus makes to his bride, then we've got to understand, we have to know what those responsibilities were, and we have to know from within that first century culture in that context. Okay, let's say I'm the groom here, I've made the proposal, everything's in order, and now I go back to my dad's house, and I begin to build. Now I'm gonna be away, like I said, for 8 to 14 to 16 months. All she has are the gifts while I'm gone. And I'm up there and I'm building and I'm working and I'm sweating and I'm working really hard because I wanna make the best house possible for my bride. I wanna show her how much I love her. I'm not gonna skimp on things. I'm not gonna do any shortcuts. I'm gonna really make this a great house for her. And so while I'm up there building, my friends come up to me and they say, Joe, listen, you know, you've been out here for 10 months. Don't you want to go back and get your wife? Don't you want to get married? Don't you want to go away on your honeymoon? Don't you want to be with her? Well, of course I do. And so they would pester me day after day. Joe, the house looks good. It's good enough already. It's perfect. Go and get your wife. Go and get your bride and make her your wife. And I would give a very, very simple response to my friends. And it would be this. I said, guys, you know how this works. It's not the mother who makes the call. It's not the son who makes the call, but it's the father who makes the call. Only the father has the right to declare when the day is to go and to get the bride. And so imagine when the disciples came to Jesus and they were speaking to him and he was speaking with them and they're talking about end times, about establishing and setting up a new kingdom. They wanted to know, how is it all gonna go down? You know, they'd spent 3.5 years with him. They really got to know him and they got to know his heart, and he preached this message of a kingdom that was coming. And they wanted to know about this kingdom, and they wanted to know, Lord, when are you going to do these things? When's the temple going to be destroyed? When are the Romans going to be done away with? When is peace going to be restored to earth? When? And I could see Jesus kind of just cracking a little smile and giving a very good Jewish answer. And he says, listen, not even the angels in heaven know about that day or the hour, but only my Father in heaven knows about that day. And the disciples, all they could have done was just kind of back off and go, you're right, I'm sorry. We need to respect and understand our own culture. So imagine then, here's the son, after all this time of building, the father comes and he says, it's time. It's time, I want you now to go. I want you to go, and I want you to go and get your bride. But now it seems that my frustration is over because I can go get her, but the truth is I have to wait a little bit longer because in Judaism, according to the customs of the people, you wouldn't go during the day to get your bride, but you had to go at nighttime.
We first learn of the Temple Mount in Genesis some 4,000 years ago.
For the Jews, it's the place that Abraham built in Isaac. It's the place that the word create from. It's the place of Holy of Holies inside of the temple. And for the Muslims, this will be the place that Muhammad rises up to heaven.
The Temple Mount is known in Arabic as Al-Haram al-Sharif, the site of 2 consecutive Jewish temples in Bible times. It currently hosts the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the iconic Golden Dome of the Rock.
The Temple Mount is the most interesting site in Jerusalem. It's the heart of the city, and we are the Museum of the History of Jerusalem.
Eilat Lieber is director of the Tower of David Museum that put together the Mount, the Haram al-Sharif exhibit. It chronicles the modern history of the Temple Mount since the beginning of photography here in 1839.
More and more visitors are very interesting in the story of the Temple Mount, since some of them cannot visit this site from different reasons. Some of them from religious reasons, some of them are just afraid.
The exhibit opens with a live cam of the Temple Mount.
We have a live all the time, so in a way you can say from the daguerreotype to the selfie. Like you have 180 years of photography in this exhibition.
It includes photos like this one of the Omar Mosque, taken around 1860, the first aerial shot taken from a Zeppelin in 1931, and one of the first videos ever on the site. Chief curator of the exhibit, Dr. Shimon Lev, said it was difficult to put together the exhibit in a balanced way.
My idea was not to ignore any of the sensitive or explosive issues and subject of this project, just to put it in a chronological, how it's developed to become the core or the center or the foundation stone, in a way, of the conflict which involved religion and nationalism and also other aspects.
Lieber says their mission is to bring people in the heart of the conflict together, help them to get to know one another, and maybe change the discussion about the disputed site. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Watching that report again, I had to ask myself this question. What is so special about the Temple Mount, especially for us as followers of Jesus? Well, I think the reality is that it represents something very important to us. You see, for hundreds of years, it's where the nation of Israel would go to experience the power and presence of God, and it was also the center of their identity. You see, it was the place where God was. There's an interesting story when Jesus comes onto the scene, because one day he goes into the temple and he gets really angry, so angry he's flipping tables over and whipping people, and you think, what is that all about? Well, it wasn't about whether you should sell CDs in the back of your church or not. It was much deeper than that. Jesus was angry because first, it was exploiting people for personal gain. They were selling things at a ridiculous rate. But more importantly, it was blocking access to God's presence. In John 2:18, the Jews then responded to Jesus. They said, well, what sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this? And Jesus answered them, something really profound. He said, destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days. And they replied, it has taken us 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days? But the temple he had spoken of was his body. You see, what's really powerful in this moment is that Jesus changed the rules of engagement. No longer would we rely on a building or a ritual to connect with God. What Jesus was saying was that now God would dwell in us, that we would become the carriers of God's power and presence. We would become the temple of the Holy Spirit. This is why Paul reminds us in Corinthians to be very careful how we treat our body. So here's the reality. You and I are the very place where God wants to dwell. It's where we can experience him, and it's where we have our identity. And so carry that well. And we want to encourage you, as we always do, as a follower of Jesus, you should be sharing your story. So if we can help you in any way, please call us today at 1-855-759-0700, and we'll put this pamphlet, Witnessing, in your hands. Well, up next, a devotional on suffering and why there is hope even in the midst of it.
Reaching Canada with the message of God's power and love. Proclaiming truth.
I love to watch the 700 Club Canada. It proclaims God's truth.
Giving hope.
Thank you for giving me hope every morning as I begin my day.
Providing hope and encouragement. Teaching segments, ministry, and prayer. Celebrating redemption.
Through your TV show, I was brought back to Jesus. Thank you.
Life-changing testimonies.
The testimonies you present are powerful.
Touching lives.
May your ministry be blessed as you reach Canada for Jesus.
It's the first time anyone from a TV ministry called to ask if I wanted prayer.
Praying for viewers.
Thank you for your prayer support. I really enjoy watching your program.
Supporting the vision.
A blessing to me and my family. I contribute to 700 Club Canada.
Thank you for your faithfulness. Because of you, Canada is being reached with the gospel.
We are at the biblical village at Yad Shmona. The wine press is here to illustrate the way that olive oil was produced back in biblical times. You know, one of the hardest things for us to deal with is the presence of pain and suffering in our lives. We ask the question of why does a good God allow things to happen in our lives that cause us pain and suffering? If he is good, why does he not deliver me from this situation? I think that the way things are laid out in Scripture are there to help us illustrate that God knows that we live in a broken world and that pain and suffering are part of our experience, no matter what we do to insulate ourselves from it. I think the illustration of the olive oil is very important because in Exodus 27, Moses tells the children of Israel, "You shall command the children of Israel that they will bring to you pure olive oil, pressed olives for the light and that is caused to burn continually, and in the tabernacle of meeting." Now, in order to get pure olive oil, you'd have had to gone through the whole process. And the fact that it comes from the people and not the responsibility of the priesthood gives the people a real material witness as to how that light is produced in the temple. So the olives, which are obviously grown on trees, the first part of the process is to take burlap sacks, put them around the tree, and then just beat the branches of that tree. Take long sticks until all those olives just fall off. Now that sounds like the illustration of a painful process, at least for the tree. But then once the olives are collected and they're put here into this trough, this large stone is rolled over them in order to make them crack, because without the crack, you can't squeeze olive oil out of them. So once the olives are put in here and cracked, again, you have another illustration of another seemingly painful part of a process. But again, it's just part of a process that's leading to a destination. And it's the same process that God's involved in our lives as well. So after going through the beating process and the crushing process, you have olives that are cracked. So those olives are then put into these sacks, which act as a strainer, and they're put exactly at the leverage point where large rocks are raised up, which causes all of this to be squeezed. A lot of pressure is put on these olives, and it's that pressure that squeezes out what's inside after the cracking and produces the oil, which runs down into this trough and is collected later on. So for the children of Israel to be able to go through this process, and then after all of this to bring to the temple as part of their sacrifice the oil is what is the fuel for the lamp that's inside the temple. In other words, where God comes to dwell among his people, there is a requirement for light. And the fuel for that light is actually the process of suffering that each one of us goes through. So my encouragement to you is that if you're in a place where God has taken you either through a time of where you feel like you're being beaten, or if you feel like you're being crushed, or even squeezed, it's all part of God's plan of eventually squeezing something out of you that produces light in the place where he comes to dwell with you. So don't be discouraged at the painful times that we go through. We all go through them. We all have seasons of pain and suffering. But I want to encourage you to keep going and allow God to finish that process, because that's where actually you find your fellowship and intimacy with him at the end.
We have a very special offer for you today at 700 Club Canada. So for a one-time donation of any amount, you'll receive Written in Stone, Secrets of the Temple, hosted by CBN's Gordon Robertson. This DVD takes you on an archaeological journey revealing discoveries that provide an extraordinary look into the Holy Temple and the people who worship there. So why not call today, make your donation, and receive our gift by calling 1-855-759-0700.
Temple Mount was the largest religious compound in the ancient world.
It is the most important archaeological site. Nevertheless, it has never been excavated.
An improbable find.
You can see it. There's no way to refute that.
Confirming the stories of the Bible.
Where did Jesus walk? There's no question he walked on these steps.
Discover what was. Written in stone. Secrets of the Temple. Get your copy today for a gift of any dollar amount.
In the book of Revelation, it says, "Whoever has ears, let them hear." And I hope you've heard today, through the stories that you've heard about Israel, your own journey and your own story. We learned that Israel means to wrestle with God and that it's okay to have the difficult questions because life sometimes is difficult. There are going to be times where it feels like you're in the middle of the storm, but you can have peace because God is with you. Just like God was with the nation of Israel throughout their history, He is with you and I today. And what's so amazing about that is that His power and presence actually resides inside each and every one of us. This is our hope, that even in the crushing, even in the difficulty, not only is God with us, but He's working out something for our good. And when we trust that, it gives us amazing hope. Well, today, I have the privilege of praying for Natasha. She asked us to pray because she's incredibly tired and depressed. And so would you just join me in praying for Natasha and others who feel the same way today? God, we all understand what it's like to feel like we are being crushed by the storms of life. But as we have learned today, it's in that wrestling that we come to the awareness that you are with us. God, I pray that Natasha right now would understand in such a powerful way that you are fighting for her, that she does not need to be afraid of the storm, that this depression does not need to define her, that you are the one who calms the storm, not only outside of us, but you choose to dwell inside of us so we can experience your power and presence every day. Thank you for that reminder, for Natasha and for all of us today, in your name, amen. And so our power verse for today is found in Proverbs 9:10, where it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." And so I want to encourage you today, don't be afraid of the questions. Don't be overwhelmed by the difficulty that life throws your way, because you have a God who is greater, who is with you, who dwells in you by His Spirit and reveals something beautiful and powerful. You are an overcomer. That is a promise. Thank you so much for watching today.
To contact us, visit 700club.ca.
Tomorrow on the 700 Club Canada, friends and family pray as a COVID-19 patient is given 0 chance of survival and a stage 4 cancer suddenly disappears.